Meniga Simi Negulu Sambona Diari Atu de Ka No Shady Kin and Kimbido Oh Mimene Atu Naye Dwe She Drosimia I don't you get it Kuzon Dia Liva Near Tanarema Lua de Sabatica Kamatan Liva Patama Baino Sagava Kuno Miarega Wicha Jarana Sampana Kuno Voli Erao Meche Voli Tita Yumia Photogevare Ichinjugaro Adinya Net Adi Alinda Net Chintoya de Serena Diava Era Louis Count no my solution no Dilatica, the Maridica Pina Deca Deca Donya Baba Deca Donya Chintoya Serena Diari Chintoya Wisa Yara Da Luyima Abu Yogi Chintoya Serena Diari Dribsabona Dia Asulucia Dilatica, the Maridica Pina Deca Deca Donya Lumpadora Ritica Donya Dilatica in Divida Sinicitari from you Yuna Pansati Mugasa Sense Pina Deca Lady Body Dola Buya Atura I told Bizungavi Solution But Mepu Minyam Funyan Nipan Body Yamo Beauty Rava Yes, I feel Haro Edit Miai Saint Annie Yamava So the Voro is of your Dinya Yabuya Riabuku Mialube Chintoya Ravel, the Yojama. So now you Yaya, a Jim of Pavene, a Jim of Pizzo, Jim Menero, a Dinya, Pio Michio. There are Dini Celebido, soon with Timpia man.
Yesterday, the Venerable Sayadaw explained that the ancients already practiced the so-called 4 guardian meditations, or also the 4 satabhaka dhammas or kamatanas, namely the meditations which are useful everywhere. And they did so in order to be free from disturbances while practicing this high-level satipatthana meditation. Now, among the 4 guardian meditations, the Venerable Sayadaw started out to explain Buddhanusati, recollection of the virtues of the Buddha, by selecting among the various virtues Vijjacharana Sampana, which means endowment with clear vision and virtuous conduct. And he spoke about Vijja, namely clear vision, in a way that was neither too not very limited, but also nor very expansive. Now, the essence of this clear vision and virtuous conduct is the training in morality, the training in concentration, and the training in wisdom, Sila Seka, Samadhi Seka, and Panya Seka in the Pali scriptural language. Now, if these if one undertakes these three trainings, then virtuous conduct jhana will arise automatically. Now the meditators here are engaging in this threefold training of morality and concentration and wisdom. And by taking virtue or morality sila as a foundation, the meditators then develop concentration, and certainly based on this, wisdom, paññā, arises. And this wisdom arises or unfolds gradually, step by step. And when this wisdom, paññā, comes to fulfillment, then the path knowledge, magga jnana, and fruition knowledge, phala jnana, arise. Now, of course, the Buddha's wisdom was of an extremely high nature or level, and it is certainly because of the practice of virtuous conduct jhana that clear vision vijja arises. Without the practice of virtuous conduct jhana, it will not be possible for clear vision vijja to arise. Today, the Venerable Sayadaw would like to continue to discuss this topic.
Visa kore nyampinya lingi yare lu soro we kolu yara mhofu sinza lu yara mhofu sa tsung tyaw ka tsin pe lu yara mhofu sora di lo adibbe yaပါတယ်ဓမ္မအဲ့ဒီသဘာဝကိုယ်တိုင်ကိုယ်ရပါလိတကယ်သဘာဝအစစ်တွေကိုသိနိုင်လောက်တဲ့ဘာဝနာမယပညာနဲ့သာရပါတယ်အကျင့်ကျင့်ရပါတယ်ဓမ္မဒါပေမဲ့တချို့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်များတော့ဘုရားကို philosopher လို့ပြောထားပါတယ် philosopher ဆိုတာတွေးခေါ်ယူရတာပါတကယ်လက်တွေ့ပါတာမရှိတော့ဘူးမြတ်စွာဘုရားတွေးခေါ်ပြီးတော့ယူရတဲ့သဘာဝတွေတွေးခေါ်ပြီးတော့ယူရတဲ့သိရတဲ့ဉာဏ်မျိုးမဟုတ်ပါဘူးအငြိကြီးတွေကင်းအောင်အားထုတ်လို့စေတနာတရားတွေနဲ့ကင်းအောင်အားထုတ်လို့ယာဂဒေါသမောဟအငြိကြီးတွေအဆူစီးချက်တွေပေါ့လေကင်းဝေးစင်ကြယ်ပြီးတော့အမှန်လေးနဲ့တရားတွေသိလာတဲ့သဘောပါအဲ့ဒါတော့နားလည်ထားဖို့လိုပါတယ်နော်
Because of the practice of virtuous conduct, jhana, various kinds of knowledges, a variety of knowledges will arise. And it is important to point out here that this variety of knowledges does not arise through mere thinking or through mere reflection, nor does this variety of knowledges arise by receiving it from someone else giving it. But rather, knowledge has to be gained by oneself. And the knowledge that we're speaking about here arises in the context of bhavana nameya paññā, meaning it is a knowledge that arises through mental development. Now, some people have identified the Buddha as a philosopher, and a philosopher is usually someone whose ideas, whose philosophy is not necessarily related to the practice. Now, this kind of an understanding does not apply to the Buddha. The Buddha is definitely not a philosopher, nor did he gain his Dhamma through thinking. it needs to be understood that the Buddha gained his Dhamma, profound Dhamma, through the purification of the mind, or by purifying the mind of the mental impurities such as lust, raga, hatred, dosa, and delusion, moha.
These are liva amandiarigo. Do it call Viro body. Tutamiyanya. Sapiya diare tutamiyanya. Do it call Viro diare sintamiyanya. Loki Zanema pare the chuk bawanamiyanya. Erinya net diara mumopabu. Erinya no, Erinya ni ma. Tujare adine body, bawanamiyanya netiba. Where Jangamyama a pinyata so the boko Prince Otara Shivare. A biga tujado Nyata diari disaliva diari. Tujado nyampi, tujado pinyapi diari diari is the body. Bema tujada le lusora Tutamea. Sabi mi più diare nyane ture. Kurai due sabi diare nyane ture. Rubasanima pare adinyama ture. Agupioge nyaniga Atapiseka Yamo diare Yunan Tabawari go Madiva. Yenema Madiva. At a Pisca and in a Madiva. Guru Diari Atol Unijiri Kiwis in Jevare Kachama. The Gay Kurega took at this at a diary body. These are people at PVT. Took at this at a diary dilogy. Memore, the Buddha is subsequently Pere and in a theatre. I do the lady since interview the Inter Pies on Babi Solution. Bobaga met the Pies on Garo. Ria Messra people with the K each and Nidorati Sago, Yamoku Titarava. A little team you a Benya look for a Benya. Benya Sora Tawadia Lekana. Cozy Lekana, Tuni Lekana, lady wally. Take to the video, a thing I lady feel. So look at the board of Gona, so up your way to Damia Sindamia, show Logisama Pare, Nyaniha, the Bawa, Sai of Mativu, the Rosalvada. A Google like 2 copies of the area had a solution, Povito, the Bawa Masaida.
The Four Noble Truths, the Four Satyas, are not known by reflection, Chintamaya Jnana, nor are they known or understood by general knowledge or by hearing, Suttamaya Jnana, but they are understood only with Bhavanameya Jnana or Panya, which is knowledge arising out of mental development. Now, in the scriptures, we find a term known as abhiññāta, and this term, the first part, abhi, means extraordinary, and extraordinary and jnata meaning knowing. So knowing dhammas, various teachings. And where or how does one know? Does one know these extraordinary dhammas through general knowledge, suttamaya jnana, or through Chintamaya Jnana. Now, these first two forms of knowing, namely knowing by reflection and knowing by hearing or general knowledge, these are not forms of directly experienced or developed knowledge by oneself. And it is when one practices that, and this direct knowledge is given in the Pali language as ataka pachaka. Now, direct experience of knowledge happens when one practices and then, for instance, discerns mentality from materiality, nama, rupa. And as one continues to practice gradually, one will come to understand the noble truth of suffering. With further practice, the more suffering one encounters, the more the origin of suffering also reveals, or also gets exposed, samudya, satya. And with further practice and maturation of one's practice, one comes to realize the truly peaceful cessation of formations, namely nirodha. And with this one understands the truth, the noble truth of the cessation of formations. And these are called abhinyata. And to say it again, the first two forms of knowledge, namely Suttamaya Panya and Chintamaya Panya, these do not know according to the true nature of an object.
Yabare. Visa Tumba, Tini Visa Shipa, Dari Yabare. Yes, of Yaya Visa Nyane, Turuya Visa Nyane, Miyaji Kwachaja Shibare. A few lesser along the Waga Savido. Yes, of Yaha Tabi Yando Yashi, Tanakuturi Pugera, Tirari Pibison Sautigera, Parami Seva body, Pibison Sautigera. A Paramikuturi Sibuya, Devi Baba Malo to Matavita Yano Yiva. This year is Manamia, Machaya Ono, a colo Timian Naide, Yano Yashibuya, Utivido, Parami Pigera. Parami Pipis of Nekajara Guru Serena Diari. Jendo, the Wizanya Tarabara. The Buddha Wizanyanga, Tabita Yanogu, piece of on the other paper. Tujara Adama, Adoke and Yansura Shivare. Adoke and Yansura Gilida, Susi go. To shall see nine. I had to make a Yano Jibo. Gridari Manamia a colo, a piashin nine, a ratamania or evil. A piashin kayare gridari remha, Moha Badore, Moha Suraga, Amadiari Boma, two way at the war, Moma Piatari at the war body. Beautiful, beautiful, tin never think Usaraboli. Quite young beetle, Nama lady, do with a moha padre. The moha yes of here, Ratamania, neck at Jashim later. The yes of Yama Amadiari Bomayo, Pina Diari Bomayo, no longer Lucia. Machine of Yadara Madia, Rama Machine, Tijari Manamiao, နှလုံးသွင်းတိုင်းပေါ်လေသိသွားတာတော့အဲ့ဒီညာကိုတပ္ပိတညာခေါ်ပါတယ်ဒါကအတောခိယခေါ်တဲ့အရတ္တမညာတိမရပဲနဲ့တော့အဲ့ဒီတပ္ပိတညာတော့ကိုရရုံမရှိပါဘူးအဲ့ဒီညာကြီးရတပ္ပိတညာတော့ရပြီးတော့အဲ့ဒီဝိဇ္ဇာညာကတပ္ပိတညာလို့ပြီးပြည့်စုံနေတယ်လို့ဒီလိုဆိုလိုပါတယ်
ဝိဇ္ဇာကတော့စဗညုတညာဝိဇ္ဇာကတော့စဗညုတညာနဲ့ပြီးဆုံး
ဟုတ်တယ်ဝိဇ္ဇာစရဏပြီးဆုံးဒီညာကြီးရမတပိတညာလည်းလို့ရတာဘာလို့လဲဆိုတော့မောဟကိုရှင်းပလိုက်တာမောရှင်းလိုက်စီရင်လိုက်လို့ရှိရင်မသိတာဘာမှမရှိဘူးတော့မိရဘာမှမရှိတာဘူးဒီတော့တပိတညာခေါ်ပါတယ်
This clear vision, which is the clear vision of the disciples of the Buddha and the clear vision of the Buddha himself differs. Clear vision that in the text is described of either 3 kinds or 8 kinds. Now, the Buddha's clear vision is or why is it different from that of his disciples? Because the Buddha in his previous existences as a bodhisattva has had trained for a long time in the various areas such as generosity, dana, virtue, sila, and so on. Altogether, he trained in the 10 perfections, and having done this, he perfected these 10 qualities, and nothing else was needed for him to then go on to gain clear knowledge. And in order to gain this clear vision, he perfected these 10 paramis with an intention to know everything that he wanted to know. Now, it is the Buddha's fulfillment with clear vision vijja that leads to or led the Buddha to omniscient knowledge. And in this context, there's a special knowledge known as asavakaya jnana, which is the knowledge of the destruction of the cankers or the corruptions. And by cankers, stains, or corruptions are meant all mental defilements. And all these mental defilements have been cut off, have ceased through the attainment of this particular knowledge. Now, among the defilements totally cut off was delusion, moha, which is of 2 kinds, either ordinary, simple, not knowing, and being bewildered, not knowing clearly. And it was with Arahata Magga, namely the path of holiness, that the Buddha cut off this delusion, moha. And as a result of this, there was nothing left for the Buddha that was unclear, that was not clear. And so, with no more delusion left, the implication is that he knew everything. And so this state of knowing everything, or this is possible only with the attainment of the path of holiness. And it is with the fulfillment or endowment with clear vision, vidya, and virtuous conduct, charana, that leads to the arising of sabanyuta jnana, namely omniscient knowledge. And as we've seen before, because all the delusion has been already cut off.
The Buddha is Saranatiyamyaga, the Mahakaruna level, Emana Jiji Mimate, Jina Tanamu, Saranatiyagu level, Peace on Sivare. Buddha is Saranatiyariyaha Mahakaruna, Karuna Bhavana Sura Pavare. The Rubasan Livarema, Lokis and Nempa Volidama. Era Karuna Bhavana Sampavare. So Edison Paramolo Buddha Pitware Kama Saranatiyamya Haleve Erikama, a council Sika Pata, a tote jazo Yashi Tovare. And tote jazo Yashi Dwadalu, council Chini to say Dwadalu. Karuna leve Tama Karuna Yam Hoto Venevoli Mahakaruna Voli Alonchi Jamimete Mahakaruna a Pito leve Yoshi Bavarema Taja Serenatiaviaga Yaswa Piaye the Karuna Mahakaruna go Pipi on Pipi on Zivare Luti Sovare.
The Buddha's practice of virtuous conduct, charana, has led him to the fulfillment of great compassion, maha karuna. Or, to express it slightly differently, his possession of virtuous conduct has led him to the fulfillment of great compassion. Now, the Buddha's virtuous conduct, charana, or included in the Buddha's virtuous conduct, charana, are the karuna bhavana jhanas, namely the absorptions connected with mental development through compassion. And when the Buddha gained enlightenment, because in his practice of virtuous conduct, this karuna bhavana jhana was included, he reached the very top, or the peak. And likewise, the compassion that he then possessed was not just an ordinary type of compassion, but rather an outstanding, the best form of, greatest form of compassion, karuna. So therefore, it is said that the Buddha's possession of virtuous conduct, or his practice of virtuous conduct, has led him to the endowment with great compassion, maha karuna.
Adokaya Nyan Kore, Aradame Nyani, Yare Kaga Sabido, Buddha Myaswa, Tatawari, Juicy Wago, the K Lulare, Mita Boli, Yashidora, Myaswa Shafa, Mune Doda Saramshido. Mune Doda Meshido, Tatawari, the Sesane Kama. Dekansigale Tutte Yodare. Kulusigale Tutte Yodare. And in that kind of leve, ပါရမီဖြည့်တဲ့ခိုက်တံမှာလည်းပဲအနစ်နာခံခဲ့တဲ့အလေးထားတွေရှိနေတော့ဘုရားဖြစ်တဲ့ခါမှာလည်းပဲကိုယ်ကျိုးနည်းနည်းမပါပဲနဲ့အနစ်နာခံတဲ့သဘောတွေအပြည့်အဝရှိသွားတယ်မေတ္တာနဲ့သီးခံခွင့်လို့အနစ်နာခံမှုတွေအခြေခံလိုက်တော့ကျင်နာတနာမှုကလည်းပဲတိတ်ကိုအထုထိပ်ရောက်သွားတာပဲအကောင်းဆုံးဖြစ်သွားတာပဲတမအဲ့ဒီကျင်နာတနာမှုရှိတော့ဘုရားမြတ်စွာဘုရားရစ်စစ်တဲ့သဘောမရှိတော့ဘူးတမရစ်စစ်တဲ့ဒေါသတွေလုံးဝကင်းသွားတယ်လို့ဒီလိုဆိုလို့တဲ့တမအဲ့ဒါကြီးကလည်းအကောင်းဆုံးရစ်စစ်တဲ့ဒေါသကင်းတာလည်းအကောင်းဆုံးအထုထိပ်ကြဆုံးအဲ့ဒီရောက်သွားတာပဲ
When the Buddha gained arahantship with arahata magga, which is also called asavakaya jnana, namely the cessation of all cankers or corruptions, then with this he possessed much loving kindness, metta, and he wished for the welfare and happiness of all beings. So the Buddha, with this, the Buddha had no more hatred towards beings, and so, this being so, he possessed much patience, and his patience became or was outstanding. Best of its kind. Likewise, in the absence of hatred, in presence of metta, loving kindness, his ability to sacrifice also reached its peak. And furthermore, he did not have had no longer any form of self-interest. And the result of his patience being at the peak, his sacrifice also being at the peak, and there being an absence of self-interest meant that he possessed much compassion, karuna. His compassion also reached a peak. And with this, through his compassion, he then practiced non-cruelty to others, and his non-cruelty also reached a peak.
Buddhaဖြစ်တဲ့အခါမှာစေတနာတရားများအကောင်းဆုံးအထုထိပ်ကြဆုံးရောက်သွားတယ်ဆိုတဲ့အဓိပ္ပာယ်ကသူတော်ကောင်းတရား9ပါးဆိုကြပါစို့သတ္တဘုရားဖြစ်မပြတ်တော့ခိုင်မာသွားတာအကောင်းဆုံးအထုထိပ်ကြဆုံးဖြစ်သွားတယ်တတိအကောင်းဆုံးပဲမြတ်စွာဘုရားမှာမြတ်စွာဘုရားမှာတတိမေ့တယ်မရှိဘူးပြီးတော့ဝရိယရဲရဲနဲ့သဘောကလည်းပဲတိတ်ကိုထူးခြားသွားတော့မြတ်စွာဘုရားမှာကိုယ်နဲ့တည်းဘာမှမငက်ကွက်ဘူးတမအဲ့လိုပြီးတော့ရှိရီဒုစိတ်တရားတွေကိုရှစ်တာဟာအဲ့ဒါတွေလည်းပဲအကောင်းဆုံးပေါ့လေအထုထိပ်ရောက်သွားတယ်တမဝတ္တပဒါလည်းအကောင်းဆုံးအထုထိပ်ရောက်သွားတယ်တုဒ္ဒတော့အထူးပြောစရာမရှိတော့ဘူးတမအာဂမတုဒ္ဒရောအဓိကမတုဒ္ဒရောပညာဥပဒနာပညာတရားမှတစ်စိတ်ဆက်ပြီးတော့ပညာမျိုးစုံပေါ့လေဒါပေါ့မိုက်ပညာဖို့ပညာတွေဒါတွေပေါ့လေဒါတွေလည်းပဲအကုန်လုံးအကောင်းဆုံးအထုထိပ်ရောက်သွားတယ်လို့ဒီလိုဆိုလို့တယ်သီလဘက်ကလှည့်ကြည့်လို့ရှိရင်လည်းသီလမှာလည်းပဲအကောင်းဆုံးအထုထိပ်ဟုတ်သလားဘယ်ဘက်ကလှည့်ကြည့်မြတ်စွာဘုရားရဲ့သီလဟာဘာမှအပြစ်ဆိုစရာမရှိဘူးဒါဆိုလို့တယ်ဣန္ဒြေထိမ့်သိမ့်မှုဒါတွေကလည်းပဲအကောင်းဆုံးအထုထိပ်ကြဆုံးရဖြစ်သွားတယ်ပြီးတော့အစားအသောက်မှာတနည်းအားဖြင့်စွမ်းသင်္ကာရောက်စီပစ္စည်းလေးပါသုံးဆွဲတဲ့နေရာမှာအတိုင်းအတာလည်းပဲအမှန်တန်တိကျတယ်ကွာအဲ့ဆိုဗျာအဲ့ဆိုဗျာစားရတော့တဲ့နေရာမှာသွားပြီးတော့ကြည့်လို့ရှိရင်အမှန်တန်တိကျပုံလေးတွေဒီမှာပြောချင်တာပဲဒါပေမဲ့အချိန်မရပါဘူးဒီမှာပြီးတော့နိုးကြမှုအဲ့ဆိုဗျာမှာဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ပ 24 နာရီမှာဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တော့ကျိန်းဆက်တဲ့အချိန်လေးဟာအများဆုံးရှိမှ4 နာရီလောက်ပဲရှိမှာပါကျန်တဲ့နာရီ20ဟာတတ္တဝါများအတွက်အမြဲတမ်းတတိရှိပြီးတော့နှုတ်ချက်နေတာပဲအဲ့ဒါလည်းပဲအထုထိပ်ရောက်သွားတာပဲတော့လောကီဆိုင်တွေဝင်စားတာတော့အထူးပြောစရာမရှိတော့ဘူးအကောင်းဆုံးအထုထိပ်ရတာရောက်သွားတာပဲအဲ့ဒီမာကရုဏာတော့တမဘဝင်စားတာလည်းအထူးပြောစရာမရှိတော့ဘူးတတ္တဝါတူတယောက်ကိုပေါ့လေလမ်းမှန်ရောက်ဖို့ရတရားသူရောက်ဖို့ရအတွက်ပေါ့လေပထမဆုံးရှိဥစွာမာကရုဏာတမဘဝင်စားရပါတယ်ဝင်စားပြီးတော့အဲ့ဒီတတ္တဝါရဲ့အခြေအနေကြည့်ပြီးတော့ဘယ်တရားနဲ့တန်တယ်ဆိုတာရှင်းရပါတယ်အဲ့သူနဲ့တန်တဲ့တရားဟောလိုက်လို့ရှိရင်သူကအဲ့ဒီအရာတွေဖြစ်သွားတာပါပဲလို့အဲ့တော့မာကရုဏာတော်နဲ့ကြည့်ရပါတယ်သူအဲ့ဒါကြီးနေ့စဉ်ဒါကြီးသုံးရပါတယ်အဲ့အကောင်းဆုံးအထုထိပ်ကြဆုံးဖြစ်သွားတာလေမာကရုဏာ
When he gained enlightenment, then his virtuous conduct, jhana, reached its peak, its very best. Let us take several examples, namely the 7 good states, the 7 sadhama. The first one out of these 7 is faith and confidence. The Buddha's faith and confidence became foremost and unshakable. It reached its very best. The same can be said of the Buddha's mindfulness, sati. It also was of outstanding quality, and the Buddha did not experience any absent-mindedness. And in the case of effort, virya, his effort was extraordinary, and he would practice without respect for body and life. Now, as for the Buddha's moral shame, here he was ashamed, totally ashamed of unwholesomeness. And so his shame was also of a topmost quality. The same goes for the moral fear of wrongdoing, ottappa. Again, not much needs to be said about knowledge or knowing, general knowledge, sutta, learning, agama sutta and digama sutta. Now, in terms of wisdom, panya, he gained various forms of wisdom, and especially path and fruition knowledge. And his virtue, sila, was of an extraordinary type. It too was at the very top. And there was no transgression whatsoever. And his restraint of the senses, indriya samvara sila, also was perfect. And with regard to food, the Buddha practiced eating in moderation. He would only eat and always, or in eating, he would always observe certain limits, even though the Venerable Sayadaw would like to speak more on this, but there's no time for it. And then, as for another quality, namely wakefulness and jagariya, well, out of 24 hours in a day, the Buddha slept at the most 4 hours. 4 hours, and during the remaining hours, he would work for the benefit of others. And the Buddha possessed, worldly absorptions, so-called lokiya jhanas, and in these he had gained perfection, or he had brought these to perfection, and he had also gained samapatti, attainments. And every day he would, in the morning, he would enter into this karuna samapatti, the attainment of compassion, and with this particular state of meditation, he would then view or survey the world in order to find out who was ready to gain the Dhamma, to be liberated. And so, in this too, in karuna, this karuna he had brought to perfection.
Buddha Myaswa Kure Sarana Dhyari Chimira Kure Me Adinya Nivali Yashitara Kure Tida Dhyari Era Sambuddha Lukhavara Paramiri Pila Adi Paramiye No Soje Aya Vali Bossesakale Lamhandai, Tia Lamhandai. Jing don't get a late hale chini, Parami Pipis of Varekama, Parami a shake home, Korean Atolu, Korean Tita Diari. Elu Diamha a man shield, a man shida, Tama Bogri, Puro, Miss of Yamhado, a mammashi, Gono Mani, Tamalu Sama Buddha look over. Parami a shake home, Korean Levatide. Siadu Tanga ni with the Tida Mao. The Tida Niamale, a mammashi, a man like Tida. Edelo Tizia Manamiari, Korean Tibido, Mamman Kangan Tibido, Eddie Mandiari go, Kuruna Tavido, Hoja Geraba, a good Eddie Diari Shinibadida.
The Buddha practiced virtuous conduct charana by himself, and as a result of this, he gained knowledge also by himself. And this then is expressed in the Pali language, or gets expressed in the Pali language through the term Sambuddha. And since he had developed his perfections, the paramis, over many existences, and he had gained a certain momentum in these certain paramis, he was able to know, and he was able to know things without a mistake. So he was able to know correctly. This, in the Pali language, gets expressed, it gets expressed as Samma Buddha. Now, the Buddha himself, he himself knew all things, and he knew all things correctly. And the Dhammas that the Buddha had realized, these Dhammas he then taught with great compassion, Mahakaruna. And these teachings are available even today.
Buddha Tabiya Nyambai Shin, Tabiya Nyano Yishi Edwet. Unia Dadwari Chushi ne Chume Ori. Tani Lamma ne Lamma. Jintoya me Ayane, Shangsha me Aya. Dari Komoti the Muvare. Dinya te Ichi Varama. Era Tira Movida Mahakaruna Roshi Edwet. Chushi Chume Koyamiro Nale Taro Dadwari. A Chumego, Shangshazi. Matwadine Lango, Handare, Dilama, the one is Ravalino, Handare, အကျိုးမဲ့ကိုရှောင်ရှားစေတယ်အကျိုးမဲ့ကိုရှောင်ရှားစေပြီးတော့အကျိုးရှိတာတိုက်တွန်းတော့ဘူးဒါတွေလုံးဒါတွေကောင်းတယ်ဒါတွေအပြစ်ကင်းတယ်ဆိုတာတိုက်တွန်းတော့ဘူးတော့ဒီတော့တပ္ပိတဉာဏ်တော်ကြီးရရှိတဲ့အတွက်မာကရုဏာတော်ကြီးရှိရရှိတဲ့အတွက်ပေါ့လေတတ္တဝါတွေမှာဘလို့အကျိုးများတယ်ဆိုတာအဲ့ဒါလေးနဲ့ပဲချိန်ဆကြည့်လို့လိုပါတယ်
The Buddha was a possessor of omniscient knowledge, Sabbanyutta Jnana. And with this, he knew what was of harm for the beings, and he also knew what was beneficial for the beings. And he very much wanted the beings to stay away from what is harmful, and it was because and he wanted them to observe what is beneficial or advantageous. And because of his great compassion, he wanted the beings to he warned them of harm, and he exhorted them to do good. And so just imagine for yourselves how beneficial the teachings of the Buddha are based on this double quality of clear vision, vijja, and virtuous conduct, jhana.
ဒီတော့ဒီချက်သုံးသပ်လိုက်လို့ရှိရင်မြတ်စွာဘုရားတရားတော်တွေဟာပြီးတော့တတ္တဝါတွေကိုကျင့်လာသနာပြီးတော့ကောင်းစုခွဲခြားနားလည်ပြီးတော့အဆိုးကိုရှောင်ရှားစေပြီးတော့အကောင်းကိုလိုက်နာစေတဲ့သဘောဟာမှန်ကန်တဲ့လမ်းစဉ်လားတန်ရှင်းတဲ့လမ်းစဉ်လားအကျိုးဘက်ကိုဖြစ်စေတဲ့လမ်းစဉ်လားဆိုတာပါလိမ့်ခံမှတ်လို့ရပါပြီဒါလမ်းစဉ်ကောင်းတရားကောင်းလို့ဆိုမှာပါပဲဒါလမ်းစဉ်ကောင်းကနေပြီးတော့တပည့်ကောင်းတွေပေါ်ထွက်လာပါတယ်တော့တရားလမ်းစဉ်မကောင်းဘူးဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တော့တပည့်ကောင်းတွေကမထွက်နိုင်ပါဘူးတော့အဲ့ဒါကိုစဉ်းစားရမှာပါပဲ
Now, just try to assess or evaluate for yourself, namely whether the Buddha's Dhamma, which he has taught for the benefit of the beings, namely wishing them to avoid what is harmful for the beings and to observe what is beneficial for them, whether this path is a correct path or not, whether it is a pure path or not. And probably you will come to the conclusion that it is a good path. And this good path then produces good disciples. Now, if this path were not good, then it would be impossible for there to be good disciples, for good disciples to come up.
လောကမှာ အတိညာဏရှိပြီးတော့အကျင့်စရဏမရှိတဲ့သူမှာသူတို့ကတရားမဲ့ပြုနေလို့ရှိရင်တဏှာဆောက်ရှောက်ရမှာမသိပါဘူးဘာသာပဲနေပါတယ်ကိုယ်နဲ့မဆိုင်သလိုဒီလိုပဲရှိပါတယ်တော့အနိတာကြီးဆိုတာလည်းရှိပါတယ်တော့ကတိယမှနားမလည်တတ်ပါဘူးအတိညာမှာမရှိဘူးဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တော့အထူးပြောဖို့မလိုတော့ပါဘူးဒီတော့အတိညာဝိဇ္ဇာအကျင့်စရဏရှိတဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်မှာသာမိမိကတရားရှိသူဖြစ်တာမဟုတ်လို့သူတစ်ပါးအကျိုးမဲ့ပြုနေလို့ရှိရင်တဏှာတတ်တယ်ကျင်နာတတ်တယ်အမှားတွေစိတ်ပြုနေလို့ရှိရင်တော့သူဒုက္ခတွေရောက်တော့မှာပဲဆိုပြီးတော့ကျင်နာတဏှာတတ်တယ်အကျိုးမဲ့မှကဲတင်ပြီးတော့အကျိုးရှိအောင်ဆောက်ရှောက်ပြုပြင်ပြတတ်တယ်
In the world, if a person possesses just or only knowledge, but does not possess virtuous conduct, no compassion, virtuous conduct, then this such kind of a person will not have any compassion for the suffering of others, for the suffering of others, or for the lack of Dhamma of others. And such a person will remain indifferent to the lack of Dhamma or the possession of adhamma in others. And so having thoughts like, oh, no, this doesn't concern me, it's none of my business. And on the other hand, if a person possesses both clear vision, vijja, and virtuous conduct, charana, then one can say that this person possesses Dhamma, and such a person then will work for the benefit of others. This person will have compassion towards others, and will see or reflect that if nothing is done, if others are not helped, then they will end up with suffering. And out of compassion, such a person will correct others for their benefit.
ဒါကြောင့်အဲ့လိုပုဂ္ဂိုလ်မျိုးရဲ့တပည့်များမှာတပည့်မုံတပည့်ကောင်းတပည့်တော်တွေဖြစ်လာတာပါပဲသာဝကဆိုတာပေါ့လေဘုရားမြတ်စွာရဲ့ဩဝါဒအနုသာသနီကိုယူတည်လေးလေးစားစားပါလေနာယူပြီးတော့ကျင့်သုံးတဲ့တပည့်အကောင်းတွေဖြစ်လာတော့တာပါပဲဒါဟာဝိဇ္ဇာဆန္ဒပြည့်စုံသူရဲ့ဖြစ်ယူဖြစ်စဉ်ဓမ္မတာပါပဲနော်
Such a person's disciples will be extraordinary, or will be of a good class, or will be of intelligent nature. So 3 categories of disciples. And the term disciple in the Pali language is known as sāvaka, and a sāvaka is defined as a person who has heard the Buddha's teachings, who hears the Buddha's teachings and practices these teachings. And as a result of this, one becomes a good disciple. And it is the law of nature for a person who possesses clear vision and virtuous conduct, vijacharana, to have such good disciples.
အကောင်းဆုံးဝိဇ္ဇာစရဏရှင်မြတ်စွာဘုရားကတပိဋကဉာဏ်တော်ကြီးနဲ့အကျိုးမဲ့အကျိုးရှိကိုပေါ့လေသိတော်မူပြီးတော့မာကရုဏာတော်နဲ့တတ္တဝါတွေကိုအကျိုးမဲ့မှကဲ့တင်တယ်အကျိုးရှိရာသို့ဤပေါင်းစုံနဲ့ပို့ပေးခဲ့တယ်အဲလိုပို့ပေးခဲ့လို့ဘုရားလက်ထက်တော်ကာလကမကောင်းသောတပည့်လို့လိုက်နာတဲ့တပည့်တွေကမကောင်းသောတပည့်လို့မရှိပါဘူးအရိယာတွေပဲပြပါတယ်ဒီမှာဟာပါပဲကောင်းစွာကျင့်တဲ့တပည့်များဖြစ်တာမဟုတ်လို့ဘုရားမြတ်စွာလက်ထက်တော်ကာလကပေါ့လေအရိယာတွေဟာဘီလီယံနဲ့ချီပြီးတော့ပေါ့လေရှိခဲ့တယ်လို့အစာမအဆိုရှိပါတယ်တော့
The Buddha can be said to be the best possessor of clear vision and virtuous conduct, vijacharana. Or we can express this differently by saying that he was the embodiment of both these qualities. And seeing what is harmful to beings, seeing what is where there's no benefit, lacking a benefit, he would then try to warn them of harm. He would try to save them, and seeing what is of benefit to the beings, he would in various ways then lead them towards these benefits. And as a result of this, the Buddha had only good disciples. He did not have any bad disciples. And in the text, or the texts say that the Buddha had billions and billions of such good disciples.
ဒီနေ့ဌာနမှာပြောစရာလေးတွေတော့ရှိနေပါတယ်။ပေတည်ရေးနဲ့လုံမြောက်ရေးပေါ့လေ။လုံမြောက်ရေးဥတည်ပြီးတော့ရှိဥစွာကုသိုလ်တရားတွေကျင့်တဲ့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်ကိုတချို့ပုဂ္ဂိုလ်တွေကတကူကောင်းဆန်သူများတစုကောင်းဆန်သူများလို့ဒီလိုနားလည်ကြပါတယ်။ကဲလည်းကဲရကြပါတယ်။ ဘာလို့ဆိုတော့အများအတွက်ဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ကိုကျိုးစွန့်ရမယ်ကိုကျိုးအရင်မလုပ်ရသေးဘူးပေါ့လေအများစင်းရလွတ်အောင်ကြိုးစားရမယ်ပေါ့ဒီမှာအဲ့ဒါကမှတကူကောင်းဆန်စိတ်ထားတွေတကူကောင်းဆန်စိတ်ထားတွေကင်းပြီးတော့တန့်ရှင်းတယ်လို့ဒီလိုတွေ့ကြပါတယ်ဘုရားမြတ်စွာရဲ့အလိုကတော့ကေတင်ရေးကိုရှေးဥစွာဦးစားပေးသလား ကိုယ်တိုင်လွတ်မြောက်ရေးဦးစားပေးသလားဆိုတာပေါ့လေဘယ်ဟာဦးစားပေးတယ်ဆိုတဲ့အချက်နဲ့စပ်ပြီးတော့နောက်နေ့ကြာမှဖြည့်ရှင်းအောင်မှာပေါ့လေဒီမှာဒီနေ့တော့တဏှာကြီးပြည့်သွားတာမဟုတ်လို့ဒီမှာပြည့်ရကြဥစု
Now, at this point, the Venerable Sayadaw, or at this point, something comes up to be said or to be added. To be said about saving, wanting to save others, and liberation. Now, there are some people who say first others should be liberated before one tries to liberate oneself. Or, others should be saved first before one tries to liberate oneself. And they say, if it's the other way around, then it's selfish. So first, they think first one should liberate others, and then liberate oneself. Now, what did the Buddha give preference to? Did he give preference to saving others, or did he place liberation first? Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.